A month later, Andrew decided it was time for Sarah to leave his house. When he told her, she refused. Confused, Andrew asked why. Sarah then revealed she was 2 weeks pregnant with his child. Andrew stood there, mouth open in shock, unable to believe what he was hearing. The revelation turned Andrew's world upside down. He struggled with mixed emotions, anger, confusion, and a sense of responsibility. He knew he had to make a decision, but the weight of it was overwhelming. That evening, Andrew sat down with Sarah. He needed to understand her motives and figure out the next steps. Sarah insisted that she wanted to keep the baby, believing it could bring them closer together. Andrew, torn between his principles and the unexpected situation, knew he had to think carefully. Andrew turned to his closest friends and family for advice. Their opinions varied, leaving him even more conflicted. Some urged him to accept the situation and make it work for Hope's sake, while others warned him about Sarah's intentions. One evening, while Andrew was trying to relax after a long day, Sarah approached him with a serious look on her face. She hesitated for a moment before speaking, choosing her words carefully. She pointed out how much Hope resembled Julia, the housekeeper, and then dropped a bombshell. "Don't you think Hope looks a lot like Julia?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying a hint of accusation. "Are you sure she is not Hope's biological mother?" Andrew was surprised, unable to process what Sarah was suggesting. "You must be out of your mind for saying that nonsense." Despite his initial reaction, Sarah's words lingered in Andrew's mind. He tried to dismiss them, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The next day, Andrew decided to address his doubts directly. He called Julia into the living room and asked her to sit down. Andrew asked Julia if she had ever given birth before. Julia looked surprised and slightly discomfort, replying that she had not. With that question cleared up, Andrew felt a mix of relief and residual suspicion. A few weeks later, Andrew told Sarah they would do a DNA test after the baby was born to confirm everything. Sarah agreed, knowing she couldn't push without proof. The house was tense in the following weeks. Andrew focused on work and taking care of Hope, while Sarah prepared for the baby. Everyone tried to act normal despite the discomfort. As the due date got closer, Andrew felt both excited and nervous. Sarah frequently insisted that Andrew should be intimate with her, claiming it would help induce labor faster, as advised by her doctor. Andrew firmly declined, insisting he wouldn't touch her until after the DNA test confirmed the child's paternity. Sarah reacted with insults and stormed off inside, leaving Andrew conflicted and anxious about the impending test results. One day when nobody was at home, Sarah's friend Maria came to see her. Maria was always curious about Sarah's plans and wanted to know how things were going with Andrew. Sarah welcomed Maria inside, and they sat down in the living room. Sarah poured them both tea, and they settled in, ready to catch up. "So, how's everything going for you? Are your plans working out?" Maria asked eagerly. Sarah sighed. "It's been complicated lately. Andrew insists on waiting for the DNA test results before deciding anything." "DNA test? What's that about?" Maria asked, surprised. Sarah explained quietly, sharing Andrew's doubts about the baby's father and his refusal to commit until the test confirmed paternity. "It's been hard," she admitted. "I thought having this baby would bring us closer, but it's causing more problems." Maria nodded in understanding, acknowledging the difficulty of Sarah's situation. Sarah expressed her uncertainty and frustration, sharing how she had hoped for a different outcome. Maria offered her support, assuring Sarah that she was there to help in any way she could. A week later, Sarah underwent a cesarean section due to complications with her pregnancy, and she gave birth to a baby girl. Andrew was by her side at the hospital, feeling a mix of emotions, relief that Sarah and the baby were safe, but also anxious about the upcoming DNA test. As Sarah held her newborn daughter in her arms, she looked at Andrew with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Andrew, look at our beautiful baby girl," she said softly. Andrew nodded, forcing a smile. "She's beautiful," he replied quietly. Sarah reached out, urging Andrew to hold the baby. But he hesitated, his mind racing with questions about the baby's paternity. Sarah, we need to wait for the DNA test, he said firmly. Sarah's smile faded slightly, but she nodded in understanding. I know, Andrew. I just hope everything turns out okay. In the days that followed, Andrew found himself torn between caring for Sarah and the newborn baby, and his growing doubts about the child's paternity. He tried to bond with the baby, but every moment was clouded by uncertainty. Sarah's friend came over to visit her and the baby. When she saw the baby, she remarked without thinking, "The baby looks so much like your ex-boyfriend." Sarah froze for a moment, realizing the slip. She whispered urgently, "Please don't say that. You know how sensitive Andrew is about comparisons." Her friend immediately regretted her words, nodding apologetically. They quickly changed the subject, both hoping to avoid any further discomfort or unintended consequences of their conversation. 5 months later, Andrew brought up the idea of getting a DNA test for the baby. Sarah hesitated, feeling unsure because she was still emotionally recovering from the birth. She suggested waiting until the baby turned a year old. Andrew got upset, feeling that waiting so long was too much. He expressed his worry, saying he didn't know if the baby was really his. Andrew, troubled by doubts about the baby's paternity, confided in his friend. He admitted that he wasn't sure if the child belonged to him, speculating that his relationship with Sarah was just a one-night stand. Andrew's friend listened attentively and advised him to be patient with Sarah, understanding the delicate nature of the situation. A week later, Andrew told Sarah he was leaving for a business trip and would be back in 2 weeks. He then went into Hope's room. "Daddy will miss you, honey. Don't worry, I will be back soon," he reassured her. "Julia, the housekeeper, will take good care of you while I am away." Andrew kissed Hope's forehead gently before departing. Later that afternoon, Sarah was surprised when her ex-boyfriend arrived unannounced at her home. Anger surged through her as she confronted him, demanding to know why he was in her baby daddy's house. Her ex-boyfriend responded dismissively, "Which baby? My daughter? You've got to be kidding, Sarah. I need to see my child. If you don't let me, I'll have to tell Andrew everything." Sarah's mind raced with frustration and confusion. She hadn't anticipated this confrontation or the threat he now posed to her fragile family situation. Her ex-boyfriend, determined and manipulative, now demanded money from Sarah to stop him from coming around. Reluctantly, she agreed to transfer him the money later. His audacity didn't stop there. He added one more condition. "Anytime I want to do anything with you, you must be ready and never complain." Sarah, feeling trapped and disgusted, reluctantly nodded her head in agreement, telling him to leave her house immediately. She couldn't believe the nerve of her ex-boyfriend and feared the consequences if Andrew were to find out about this disturbing encounter. 2 days later, Sarah's ex-boyfriend returned unexpectedly. He pressured her into agreeing to be intimate with him, threatening to reveal their past to Andrew if she refused. Reluctantly, Sarah gave in to his demands. He insisted they use Andrew's bedroom for their encounter, leaving Sarah feeling uncomfortable and distressed about the situation. After her ex-boyfriend left, Sarah went to the kitchen and spoke to Julia. She asked Julia not to mention anything about what had just occurred to Andrew. She explained that it was a private matter and assured Julia that her job was secure as long as she respected her privacy. Julia nodded understandingly, agreeing to keep Sarah's request confidential. One afternoon, Hope was sitting quietly in the living room when Sarah walked in and tried to chat with her. But Hope didn't seem interested. When Sarah tried to be friendly, Hope shook her head sadly and said, "I can't be friends with someone who's forcing my dad to be with her." Sarah was surprised by Hope's blunt honesty. Feeling hurt and a bit defensive, she snapped back, "I don't even like you either. I was just trying to be nice." Hope's face stayed serious as she firmly stated, "I don't care. Just stay away from me and my dad." When Andrew came back from his business trip, Julia struggled with the decision whether to tell him what had happened while he was away. She remembered Sarah's serious warning not to say anything. Despite wanting to be honest with Andrew, Julia chose to keep quiet about the situation. Andrew noticed Julia's hesitation and asked gently if there was something she needed to share. Julia, remembering Sarah's words, shook her head and quietly replied, "No, sir, everything's fine." Andrew sensed there was more to Julia's unease, but didn't press further. He moved on with his usual routine, leaving Julia feeling conflicted but relieved that she had followed Sarah's instructions. After Andrew left, Sarah called Julia into the kitchen. She looked at Julia seriously and said, "You thought I didn't see you. If you tell Andrew anything, I'll punish you." Julia felt scared and nodded quietly. She knew Sarah meant it and felt stuck, unsure about what to do next. Sarah's warning made Julia worry about the consequences if she said anything to Andrew. Later that day, Andrew returned from dropping Hope off at school. He noticed Sarah's troubled expression, but didn't push for details immediately. Throughout dinner that evening, Sarah struggled to keep her composure, her thoughts consumed by Anthony's ominous warnings. After dinner, in the quiet of their living room, Andrew finally asked Sarah what was bothering her. She hesitated, unsure how much to disclose. Eventually, she decided to lie to Andrew. She begged him to let her cousin stay for a while, explaining that he was having housing issues. Reluctantly, Andrew agreed to Sarah's request, sensing her distress and wanting to support her. A week later, Anthony moved in under the guise of being helpful and humble. He would perform tasks like washing Andrew's car to avoid suspicion. However, when no one else was around, he began making advances towards Sarah that made her increasingly uncomfortable. As time passed, Sarah grew to dislike Anthony's presence more and more. She summoned the courage to ask him to leave her boyfriend's house, but Anthony's threats kept her silent and fearful. Feeling trapped and distressed, Sarah finally confided in her friend. Her friend gently reminded her of previous warnings about getting involved with Anthony, who had now become a source of trouble in her life. As Anthony settled in, he began pressuring Sarah to deceive Andrew into believing she needed money urgently for her mother's surgery. When Sarah approached Andrew with this fabricated story, he sadly admitted that their finances were tight due to struggling business. This revelation angered Anthony, who decided to take matters into his own hands. Frustrated and vengeful, Anthony attempted to arrange for some men to kidnap Andrew, claiming he was a corrupt police officer in the past. However, upon seeing Andrew's picture, the men refused, recounting how Andrew had previously helped them. This incident only fueled Anthony's growing animosity towards Andrew. As time passed, Andrew noticed Anthony's prolonged stay and confronted him about it after returning from work one day. Anthony initially agreed to leave soon, claiming he had found an apartment, but needed money to finalize the rent. When Andrew suggested Anthony find a job to cover his expenses, Anthony's anger boiled over. He insulted Andrew, calling him selfish and worsening the tension between them. Anthony stormed inside and angrily yelled at Sarah, saying mean things to her. He called her useless and said she couldn't stay in one place. Sarah felt upset and hurt by Anthony's words. She stood quietly, feeling like she couldn't do anything to change the situation. His harsh words made her feel even worse than before. She really wanted to find a way to get out of this bad situation. A week later, Anthony approached Sarah and made a shocking suggestion that he had feelings for Hope. Sarah was horrified and immediately ordered him to leave and never come back, insisting that Hope was still a young girl and his feelings were completely unacceptable. Anthony, however, refused to comply with Sarah's demand. When Sarah threatened to tell Andrew what he had said about Hope, Anthony responded defiantly, "If I go to jail, you're coming with me." His words left Sarah feeling even more trapped and uncertain about how to handle the escalating situation. When Andrew returned from work, Anthony approached him and sincerely apologized for everything he had said and done. Andrew, known for his kindness, accepted Anthony's apology and even offered to assist him with his house rent the next month. However, despite Andrew's forgiving nature, he remained cautious. He quietly pulled Julia aside in the kitchen and instructed her to keep an eye on Anthony, expressing his lack of trust in both Anthony and Sarah. This cautious approach revealed Andrew's lingering doubts and concern about the situation in his own home. Hope was watching television in the living room when Anthony walked in and started complimenting her, saying she was beautiful. Hope didn't find it funny and felt uncomfortable. When Andrew came home, Hope immediately told him, "Daddy, I don't like Anthony. I want him to leave our house right now." Andrew, concerned, asked why. Hope bravely recounted what Anthony had said to her. Andrew was shocked and angry. He called the police immediately upon hearing Hope's account. When Anthony saw the police arriving, he lashed out at Andrew, insulting him and calling him foolish for involving the authorities. Anthony accused Andrew of trying to take someone else's child. Andrew, confused and hurt, turned to Sarah for an explanation. Sarah finally confessed that Andrew was not the biological father of her child. Surprisingly, Andrew remained calm. He admitted to Sarah that Julia had already told him everything earlier, and he had decided to play along until the truth came out. The police then took Anthony away, putting an end to his troubling presence in the house. Andrew, filled with anger and betrayal, turned to Sarah and told her to leave his house immediately, taking her daughter with her. "Now I see why you've been avoiding the DNA test." Sarah, realizing there was no way to mend the situation, gathered her things and left with her daughter. As they walked out the door, Andrew felt a sense of relief and happiness. The house was finally free from deceit and tension, and Andrew looked forward to moving on and rebuilding his life without the shadows of lies and betrayal. A week later, Andrew's boss called him and invited him to bring Hope over for a visit. His boss and his family had just returned from abroad, and although they had heard a lot about Hope, they had never met her. Andrew gladly accepted the invitation. When Andrew told Hope about the visit, she was hesitant. Being an introvert, she didn't like going out much. However, after some gentle persuasion from Andrew, she agreed to go. Andrew also wanted to take Julia, the housekeeper, along with them. However, Julia declined, saying she had a lot of work to do at home. As Andrew and Hope prepared for the visit, Andrew felt excited about introducing his daughter to his boss and his family. When Andrew and Hope arrived at his boss's house, they were warmly welcomed. The boss and his family greeted them with smiles and open arms, making them feel at home. After some time, as everyone settled into the living room, Andrew's boss looked at Hope closely. He said, "Hope looks so much like his housekeeper who ran away a few years ago." Andrew was surprised by the comment, but not wanting to create any tension, responded calmly, "It's just how life is. People do look alike sometimes." He tried to change the conversation to other topics, hoping to avoid any awkwardness. The rest of the visit went smoothly, with Andrew's boss and his family enjoying their time with Hope and Andrew. As they left, Andrew couldn't help but think about the odd coincidence, but he chose to let it go for the moment and focus on the positive experience of the day. When Andrew got home, he asked Julia, the housekeeper, if she had done this kind of work before. Julia replied that she had, but only in her village. Andrew said, "Okay," and Julia asked, "Sir, is there a problem?" He said no, but went to his room, thinking about the possibility that Julia might be Hope's mother. The next day at work, Andrew asked his boss why he thought Hope looked like his maid who ran away. The boss told him the story of how his brother had gotten their maid pregnant. He wanted her to get rid of the baby, but she refused and ran away. They have been looking for her ever since. When Andrew heard this, he was shocked. He then showed his boss a picture of Julia. The boss immediately recognized her and said, "That's her." Andrew, now very curious and concerned, decided to drive his boss to his house. When they arrived and Julia saw the boss, she was shocked. She realized her past was catching up with her. Andrew asked Julia to sit down and talk. The boss explained how they had been searching for her for years and why. Julia then narrated her story. She explained how she had been living with one of her friends because her parents didn't accept her after she got pregnant out of wedlock. When she gave birth, her friend told her that she couldn't accommodate both her and the baby anymore. Feeling desperate and with nowhere to turn, Julia decided to leave her baby in the trash, hoping someone would rescue her. She hid nearby and watched as a policeman found the baby, called an ambulance, and took her to safety. Relieved that her daughter was in safe hands, Julia returned to her friend's house. Later, she was fortunate to find work as a housekeeper for Andrew. Julia revealed that the first day she saw Hope, she knew immediately that Hope was her daughter. Initially, she wanted to run away with Hope, but she saw how much Andrew loved and cared for her. This made her change her mind. Since then, Julia had been trying to tell Andrew the truth, but didn't know how to, as she was scared and ashamed of her past actions. Andrew listened intently, feeling a mix of shock, compassion, and understanding. The room was filled with tension, but also a sense of relief that the truth was finally out. The boss expressed his regret over the past, while Julia felt a weight lifted off her shoulders, even though she was still anxious about what would happen next. The boss then begged Julia to consider accepting his younger brother back, explaining that his brother had never married since she left and had always talked about her. Julia was hesitant, but eventually agreed to meet with him. A few days later, Julia met Hope's father again. It was an emotional reunion, filled with apologies and a renewed sense of connection. Over the next few months, they spent time rebuilding their relationship, and Hope slowly got to know her biological father. As time passed, Julia and Hope's father grew closer. They realized that despite their past mistakes, they still had feelings for each other. Andrew supported their reunion, understanding that this was a chance for Hope to have both her parents in her life. When Hope and Andrew got home, Hope asked him, "Daddy, what will you gift me on my 18th birthday? It's next week." Andrew smiled. "Don't worry, I have a very big surprise for you." On the day of Hope's birthday, she was shocked to see Andrew on his knees. "Daddy, what are you doing?" she asked, confused. Andrew looked up at her and said, "Hope, I need you to stop calling me Dad. I have loved you from the beginning, but I wanted you to grow up first before I told you how I really feel." Hope was stunned. "No, this is not happening. You must be joking. Daddy, what are you doing? I think you're drunk." Andrew shook his head. "I'm not drunk, Hope. I'm just a few years older than you. When I picked you up from the trash, I was only 20. Now you're 18. You're old enough to get married or have a boyfriend." Hope felt a wave of confusion and disbelief. "But you are my father," she said. "No, I'm not your biological father," Andrew insisted. "Please, I'll give you some time to think about it." Hope was overwhelmed and didn't know what to say. She felt torn between the man who had raised her and this new, uncomfortable revelation. She needed time to process everything, and Andrew's words left her with more questions than answers. A few months later, Julia and Hope's father decided to get married. The wedding was a simple but joyous occasion, bringing together their families and marking a new beginning. Andrew attended the wedding with Hope, happy to see Julia find happiness and relieved that the secrets and tension that had plagued their lives were finally resolved. Hope, now surrounded by both her biological and adoptive families, felt a sense of completeness. One evening, Hope left her mother's house, feeling upset and ready to pack her things to leave Andrew's home. She had been hurt by something he said, and it weighed heavily on her mind. As she started sorting through her belongings, trying to decide what to take with her, Andrew approached her quietly. "I'm sorry, Hope," Andrew said with a serious look on his face. "I shouldn't have said those things. I know they hurt you, and I regret it deeply." Hope paused, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. She had trusted Andrew, and his words had cut deeply. But as she looked at him, she saw the sincerity in his eyes and the concern on his face. After a moment of silence, Hope took a deep breath and said softly, "I forgive you, Daddy." Andrew's shoulders relaxed visibly as he let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Hope," he said sincerely. "I promise I will do better." Unknown to him, Hope had started having feelings for him too. That evening, Andrew went to a bar and drank himself into a stupor. When he got home and woke up the next morning, He was shocked to see Hope lying beside him. He tried to explain, but to his surprise, Hope told him it was nothing, and that she wasn't mad. She even confessed that she had feelings for him too, and had been for a long time. 2 months later, Hope discovered she was pregnant. Panic set in as she wondered what she would tell her parents. How would they understand? What about her studies? She felt overwhelmed with questions and fears about the future. Now, dear viewers, we need your help. What do you think Hope should do next? How should she handle this situation? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Turn on post notifications to get notified when we upload the next episode. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.